extremely well versed in. So, and those of you that didn't attend today, we'll go ahead and eat your lunches for you, if that's all right. So don't feel bad that they don't get used. So I just want to start off by saying, hey, I think everyone knows me, but if not, my name is Susan Hoffman. I am a member of the board. Professionally, I work at United Way Metropolitan Dallas. And I want to say thank you to Lori, Dee, Ashley, Richard, and the entire Workforce Solution team, and to the Child Care Group team, Tori, Rhonda, Sherry, and I know, Mark. I was like, how did I forget his name? Mark, and I know so many people for Mark, not only all the time, but also preparing for this meeting. So thank you very, very much. And thanks to Alan, who has asked smart questions and delved into data in thoughtful and strategic manner. So thank you, Alan, for always being on point to do that. Just a couple of opening comments. As we all know, the child care funds that are the largest part of our budget and our largest contract. And I have every single confidence that we all agree that it is a fiduciary responsibility for us to understand the use of these dollars, and I also and the resulting outcomes. And I also think it's a moral responsibility for us to understand the impact of those resources on children, families, child care providers, and employers. So it is a good way and one that we want to take lightly. We formed this committee, if you some of you recall, way back in pre-pandemic days, which is like a long time ago. And the world's changed significantly since that time. Bill and I were just chatting about the really explosive growth in the budget, particularly in child care, but overall. And so much of that is due to the pandemic and the world health over the next couple of years. But as I reflected back on our committee goals, and I wrote everything up just to make sure I'm right. They remain constant. The first is it's a committee to be a mechanism for board members to gain a clear understanding of child care dollars entrusted to us, sources, uses, regulations, goals, measures, progress, and the impact that to ensure that we are being the very best stewards possible. Secondly, it is understanding, helping us as board members understand the role of Workforce Solutions staff, the board, and our contractors, both in terms of child care contract management and overall community strategy for both child care and child care. It's also a forum to review and analyze data to drive strategy, and it is a communication resource to disseminate pertinent child care information, updates, progress, and challenges to board members in between formal board meetings. And I trust that the questions that we ask and the information that we seek are to help us meet these objectives and to help us meet the needs of those we serve. We want to hear from each board member as what it is you need to help us all do our jobs better. So,
thank you so much. We're going to lead off today. I'd like to just start by recognizing this is International Women's Day on March 8th, started in the United Kingdom in 1908. A global day celebrating the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. And today marks a call to action for accelerating gender parity. Say it. What better day to talk about working moms and kids in care? I thought, well, you couldn't pick a better topic. And I think you'll see from the data, predominantly single mothers are the ones who are customers of our system. So thank you everyone for being here today. I do think because we have a quorum, we could vote to accept the minutes from the prior meeting. August 24, 2021, which I believe was virtual. Is that right? Yes. Just get a yay or nay on that.
So,
Second. Ken and Stephanie, Madam Chair, call for a vote.
So all those in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Thank you for that. Public comments, Connie, was there anyone? No one registered for public comments. Okay. We begin with the handout you were given, Workforce Solutions Greater Dallas, and it is the task force briefing materials. I want to start off with Ashley working with me to talk about the grant management. There are two phases to what we're going to talk about today. Grants come to the workforce board, managed predominantly by our staff. Demetria and her team head up child care. Connie heads up policy. Ashley heads up fiscal. Beyond that, we contract direct services in all of our work to contractors over through a fair and open procurement process. It so happens Child Care Group is the best in the business and has consistently won that procurement to continue that work. But I'm going to focus on the grant management. It's the first few pages. I think we'll start on page 5. Coaching Stephen out there. Stephen he has jumped in from Mario. We've still not replaced Mario. If anybody knows of a data tech guy that would like to, or woman who would like to work here, please, please, please. We are advertising, but it's tough to get talent right now. It's very tough and it's costly. Looking at this, and Bill had asked me, how rapidly has this grant grown? And I think it's most evident on this sheet. We jumped from 48 million to 62 million, to 122 million, down to 82, and again up to 133. And I understand next year will be very similar, and the year after will be an increase. We're now talking of billions of dollars coming to Texas, and we represent about 10.7% of the need in Texas for formulaic funding. I'll go over how some of this is not formula funded, sadly. This is just everything we do. There's formula money. There's local match, and I think we concentrate on that at many of the board meetings. It's difficult in needing matched funds. We have that dollar in here. Protective services. This is money given to us on an as-need basis. It's always too much or too little for who comes in the system. It's been very hard for voters to judge how many kids would be assigned to protective services and need child care during this period. So this one runs heavy and then it runs short, and we have to constantly stay on this one. SIR, that's the service industry money. We'll talk to you about that. I have a separate page that we'll focus on in a little while. And then the quality funds. You've heard a lot about what we spend to develop the Texas Rising Star program. That's quality money. Quality money is 2% of the CCF grant. That's correct. But in this case, if you look at it, there's also been some additional money dumped into the most recent year. But that 2% doesn't go very far when you're trying to handle the number of child care providers in our community. Ashley, kind of done a little more than I intended to, but would you like to talk a little bit about the grants?
I think you really stole my thunder there. So that's a good overview of all of the grants. I think at the bottom here, we have some details laid out for you, specifically our local match partners and then other partners aside from our primary quality provider there in footnote 4. I'm sure we're going to talk a bit more about the service industry during this meeting. That's been a major topic, and that's in the money that we have available right now is in that second line under the service industry category. But other than that, I think that was a really good overview. I'm here for any questions. If you have questions on our overall funding before we dive deeper into the child care group level funding.
Actually, the money on here, excluding the service industry money, we have never lapsed or underutilized funds. Is that correct?
That's correct. Now, we received some service industry money and some CARES Act funding in our formula grant up at the top of the page. And that's when you see the sizable jump in the budget for child care formula that year ending in 2020. We've historically spent all of the funding, but of course that CARES Act funding was highly specific. So we did return money in those specific areas in the child care formula grant.
Thank you. That's what I wanted you to offer. It's now separate and we can focus on it as a separate thing. So Stephen, if you could pull up that SIR page, and I apologize, most of you in the audience will not have this page yet. It was an end of day yesterday. Find a page. The people around the table can look at a numbered page 10 in your packet that we handed you. And this, there it is. This is the state's summary, if you would, as of February 7th on how this program went. Let me just talk a little bit about the program. The state decided to offer millions of dollars. You see at the bottom, the goal was 54,940 children in care in a year. And it was give free childcare with very little eligibility requirements other than self-attestation, a year, 12 months of free childcare to anyone working in the service industry or agreeing to take a job in the service industry. It was a test, if you would. They thought it might be an easy way to jumpstart our service industry. However, you can see from the statewide overall review, they're sitting at 10,000 kids in care, almost 11. We were able to do 15%, which is pretty close to the state average. You'll notice across the board, the little boards may have done better, the big boards didn't do as well. We're just saying this to round out. This is not a utilization conversation that is within the power of the contractor or even the board to say this must be spent. This was a pilot. It did not fare well. We will give back unspent money, less the money we need to complete the 12 months of care. So for anyone we registered, they do get a full 12 months of care, and we'll analyze how much money that is. The state will leave that money with us. They will take all the rest of the money back from around the state, and around June, I believe, the commission will decide what to do with this money. So this was state discretionary money, if you would, but it was run through the system as child care. Is that clear, kind of helpful?
So the parameters of service industry were state, that was the state decision. So these dollars sounds like about 10 to 15% of what they bet was.
Yes.
Uptick, and the rest will actually stay, they'll decide.
It will go back the end of this month.
Yeah.
Well, when we close out, and 2 months
Yeah,
later,
and
but
the state will decide in June
what else they could do with this money. And it's a lot of money going back, as you can see, and I think everybody put out the full force. North Central Texas actually took out recruitment on Spectrum, an expensive media campaign. And you can see where their percentage is. But the utilization of this, and these are anecdotal, I want to make sure it's opinion. D&I, Child Care Group, we've all talked about it. If you're going to work third shift, I bet you've already contemplated who's going to keep your child. You're going to work third shift in the hospital, I bet you don't have a child perhaps. So to rely on a government program like this, knowing you only get 1 year, that's a roll of the dice. So we tried last night. Last night was wonderful, Stephen. Thank you so much for the nighttime job fair at Gillies. And we did feature Child Care Group and service industry funding, still trying to push that out. We had all these jobs in the service industry, and we had barely 100 engagements, a little over 100 engagements by job seekers. That could say something about the service industry. It could say something about nighttime job fairs. We're not really sure what it says, but we will have a post-mortem with 24-hour Dallas. They cannot find the workers they need, guys, and we need to do better than this. We'll get into the industry codes too. In SIR, the service industry had to be an employer who was recognized by the codes that were established by the state. Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind just speaking a little bit for Pepsi, because you've questioned this of everybody we've talked to.
Well, I saw the low percentage that was getting used, and I know that there are a lot of industries who are considered essential industries who whose employees this would benefit. So I asked about the labor codes and see if we would qualify if some were manufacturing food. But depending on what the job was, it was a different code. And so I've asked about the possibility of introducing other labor codes in this.
And that might have done really well for the pilot to make it broader as soon as we saw the low utilization, but the state is controlling that because I think it was a commitment made to get the funding to do this. Restaurant was the specific target. I think restaurants, bars, things that had shuttered due to lack of tourism and lack of local business. So foot traffic was low. We needed to get the people back into these establishments, and it's not going well. It's not for lack of trying.
Pepsi was left out.
Sounds about that.
In a nice way to say it.
Half of Amazon was out, half was in.
And the choices were made by
Yes. And no harm.
so not by the local boards.
No, sir. No, we did not.
TWC.
We did shaking this thing up in a hurry. Anything else to offer on this are our questions? I know this is a lot of money. Yes, everybody's spending the money back. That's the point. People did not spend the money because it was perhaps ill-conceived. It didn't go far enough, maybe on the industries, or it didn't really answer the question that working parents are asking if they have to work late hours. We also. Go ahead.
So, first of all, thanks. This is great information. I think my question really has to do with what do we do now? So as I'm kind of just looking at this, we have, looks like smaller regions did significantly better than larger regions with these dollars. So you have several regions that did upwards of 40, even upwards of 50% of their utilization, but those tend to be regions that had an estimated sort of pool of less than 1,000 kids, which is different than sort of our region, and we all sort of know how spread out Dallas is. But are we talking to other regions, or are there plans, or do we have capacity to start to talk to other regions about what worked or what didn't work, and what are the specific learning, so that if we get another opportunity like this, we, can be focused and strategic and hopefully get more dollars out the door.
Alan, I do believe the state will gather us, I'm afraid it twice. I do believe the state will gather us to talk about what didn't work, what does the money need to be spent on. I hope they will consult with us before the commission takes it up in June. Happy to take input on that. But
yeah, my push is this, and then this is the last thing I'll say, is that the state may do things and we should be at the table, and that's great. But these are opportunities, whether or not the state convenes other folks. And I think given the amount of money that we have, and given that these opportunities, I guess my push is that at some point we discuss how do we be proactive about having these conversations and doing planning, so that it's not dependent on the state, but we have opportunities to take as much advantage of funds as is possible when we get these kind of opportunities. And again, I mean, the overall state average is about 20% rounding up. Our utilization was about 16% rounding up. And that's probably not surprising given how the large region and the spread and the need here, that we'd be at a lower percentage than average. But there is an opportunity to make sure that we're planful, and that the postmortems are proactive, and that's my push to the group.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And one of the things that I've heard, particularly with that, is expanding the aperture, because it looks like, you can make all kinds of assumptions. Perhaps in smaller towns, there are not as many job opportunities in the service sector. That's what we experience. Yeah. So if we are able to expand who's eligible for this, that seems like that might be a good thing to proactively
and a shout out to Child Care Group, and I'll do it for you, Sherry, because it is worth looking at. If you'll increase the size of the picture for us again, Stephen. If you look at number 13, Hot Cog, that is also Child Care Group, and there you were able to get 20%. And Southeast Texas, which is down at 18, hit the 51%. I know that community, I know it well. There are not a lot of service opportunities there. Did it go healthcare?
No, it wasn't healthcare. It was lodging. And they really do have some service industries there as far as restaurants now.
New stuff open.
It is, but Susan's spot on. There's just not a lot of other opportunities unless you're in manufacturing or something like that.
Well, it has down there.
Yes.
Refinery.
So that's why we were able to hit it down there.
Got it.
And then in heart of Texas, again, it's so rural and it has all the rural pockets. Again, the Dairy Queens, the Jack in the Box, those are the ones that we really placed in.
Fantastic. And we talked about Alamo. Alamo did well among the 7 major boards. Dee pointed out, though, it's kind of like taking urban Dallas and combining it with Arlington. They have SeaWorld and they have an amusement park, and they have, so their tourism may have been more thriving than ours at the time. Right. And I think we could probably spend it this summer a little better, but it won't be here this summer. So
Lori, would you mind, this is Miguel, do you mind if I ask a question?
Please.
It was the data breakdown are really helpful. One of the things that Rebecca said I thought was really helpful, trying to pair it with what Alan was suggesting about, is there a way that we might be able to come up with, even if it's like a 1 or 2 pager, like here are the things that we learned, and here are some suggestions that we would particularly make, like expanding the codes and so on and so forth. I think that could actually be really helpful. And just for us in general to sort of have a step back to say, what are things that may not just benefit us in Dallas, but some of these other areas, particularly the larger areas that seem to have been, it seems we outperform in some, and even some of those other larger groups. But I think that would be helpful. The second question, and this is a question of just pure ignorance, because I just don't know enough about this. So with us giving the funds back, what is that like? Do we ever get a second shot at those funds, or is it's completely up to the state to determine whether they're going to do this pilot or not?
A direct quote from the state when we met was they will claw back all of this money and figure out in June whether or not and how to redistribute. What I'm seeing is we are getting additional money from the federal government without this infusion. So the commission could determine to use this elsewhere. The figures are in the billions for the next 2 years. Our money will be the same or will increase. We have not had a utilization issue with formula money. We know the rules, we know the eligibility, and right now we're well over 110%, or right at it, of our goal, and we have about 3,700 kids on the wait list.
Yeah, it's about 37.
So we could use this money in regular childcare for needy families. This particular pilot, I doubt we will see again. It's worth studying though to perhaps impact, I wouldn't say people's decisions necessarily, but the flow of government money should look again at what's happening to communities. One thing I stressed to the state last Monday, we were in a general session back in Austin, we're seeing a lot of poor families leaving Dallas because they can't afford to live in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to see an increase perhaps in some of the suburban areas. And perhaps North Central, who's had a really difficult time, if you look at their numbers, even with a full-out campaign, they may start seeing poverty children arrive on their doorstep that they had not envisioned. So I think that ebb and flow of poverty and affordability in Dallas and Houston and Austin, Austin. But I think it's all worth looking at. It was not in the formula prior to COVID. The formula money might need scrubbing. We might need to look. I think we are 10.7% of state money in most every situation in childcare. They use that formula perhaps in this, and it may not have been the right way to go. So affecting pilot money with a formula, I think it's a good method to influence, Miguel. So I appreciate those offerings.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Lori.
So
Lori, this is Carter. If I could ask a quick question too, to kind of go along with Alan and Miguel. It does kind of stand out to me that San Antonio Alamo did something right. And however they did it, it wouldn't hurt to reach out to them and ask them if there are some best practices that they employed that we just didn't see or didn't think of, or there's something that, that stands out in their market. So honestly, I think they did pretty darn good, and we should talk to them again.
Sure, Adrian there is very helpful. In fact, recently they received over $100 million from the city to invest in upskilling. So I quickly sent that to Lynn McBee, asking whether or not our city could do that. So I have a long-standing relationship with San Antonio, and I would love to find out if there's anything that they've done that we can benefit from, and maybe put that into a paper. I think Gulf Coast had challenges. Tarrant obviously had challenges, and so did North Central, and it's the cost of these slots if you're doing broad targeting or advertising.
What's the cost of minimum services? If we were
That's
all on
it.
the same
Yes.
plan, and that's,
Yes.
the rural communities got fewer than we do in Fort Worth, Dallas, Houston, and we do expand. We can't be looked at the same way.
That's why we look at those 7 big ones.
And I think that's a good point. I could call San Antonio at 30,000 feet and ask them.
Sure. They're doing a lot of good things. I think Michelle's next.
Yeah, I was just gonna recap everything that they said. I think what I hear them asking is that the white paper is closed. That's practice. What I hear you saying is yes. And so we'll be able to circle back and give that guidance, maybe what do you think the next board meeting?
Oh, easy by April. We probably will have it before then. We've kind of beaten the bushes for this one.
Yeah.
But after the program closes March 31, we'll work up our both facts and figures and suggestions, because I think a lot of us have things that we heard, saw. Rhonda, on the, and I hate to go there, but you gave us a great list when the county, when Parkland asked for it, of alternative care, non-traditional hours. That's a really small list of about 25, 26 providers.
Yes.
And we don't really have 24-hour care anywhere, do we? We used to a long time ago.
Just a handful.
A handful. And a lot of day homes on that list, not full-fledged centers. So for a metro area, that might be something. San Antonio may have more of that than we do.
Yeah, heavily tourism there.
Oh, heavy
So
tourism.
much entertainment business, et cetera. One of the things I'd like to just mention, Lori, is because we did brainstorm this, and as much as we talk to our providers, if we were able to open the definition of those served, I'd love to put on the table for consideration that we include automatic enrollment for the children of childcare workers, because they would
Yes.
all qualify based on income. And we've struggled so much with the utilization of this new funding that's coming down. There's a lot of reluctance to use it to increase wages. But if we said, if you are a childcare worker working in the state of Texas and you're in the income threshold for the subsidy program, you can automatically enroll your children. That is a very small but meaningful benefit that we can provide providers. And it would really help with the hiring, the staffing crisis that we see right now.
And you and I both have rung that bell many
Yep.
times through this year and a half, pushing that childcare workers should have been first and center, because that provided more capacity for us. But it was not in the discussion when these funds were allocated. It was about service in the restaurant industry, I think. I wasn't there. But you can see from the stringent coding, it was about that tourism, bring the restaurants back, bring back the service industry, and that they really weren't able to move off that time. We did push that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's what, it's like a restaurant industry walking in there, what's with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so we'll expect a report back in the next month or so, with recommendations of what you learned, and then wait to find out, is this money, what's gonna happen to this money?
Right.
Again, something that we can say, this is what we learned, this is what we learned, or places where it worked well, and recommendations we could make to the state, should they choose to do this. So, anything else about SIR? Next agenda item.
Thank you. And Stephen, if we go back to page 6, please. Thank you, sir. As I mentioned, there are contracted funds out of those grants. So we've done the grant, big picture, here are the contract conversations. And we did a 5-year, so the current grant, there is one correction. I'll let Dee make that correction on the contract. Apparently the spreadsheet got confused when we put in a point. Go ahead, Dee, on 2021.
Yes, 2021, the contract total amount is 97,804,914.
Thank you for that. So you can see the rapid jump on these contracts. This was just 4 contracts ago. This was a $75 million contract consistently. And that had risen over maybe a 10-year trajectory since those 7, when we started getting the influx of extra money for unemployed and young adults and childcare. There was a big deal made at the Senate. It goes so far back, those senators aren't there, many of them. It's a great recognition that without childcare, we don't have a workforce, but we also are not building our workforce. My favorite phrase, your 3-year-old today is your workforce in 15 years. And we've all seen 50-year plans. So it gets away with us pretty fast. So looking at this 5-year span, we wanted to call attention to how quickly we've advanced things at Childcare Group and how stable their operating costs have been. So we've only in the last 2 years really started infusing lots of dollars. We've got Mark on the call, we've got Ashley on the call. Also the target, let's just look at the targets. targets remain pretty consistent against the money for what we were doing. The reason you see reduced targets in the last 2 years versus that 16,000 over 2 years is because we, the board, increased payments to providers considerably. After many distressing years of underpaying the market, we finally got our got permission and information that drove us to raise the rates just really perfectly. Now, our target says an outcome, but that's not the outcome. We're already at 15,000 kids in care.
Right, it's around 15,000.
15,000 now. And that's changing every moment out here. It's just the way life is, more like 110%. All right. Questions about this contract, or Ashley, if you would like to talk about the footnotes. I think you've already done that, the SIR, but we also had some CARES Act money in here. And then we'll talk a little bit in a minute about the other sources of money. This follows on the other 3 pages. Any questions about the child care group contract?
Yeah, just quick question. So just, first of all, this is great and great to see, that we're again hitting target. How do you feel like the amount that we get from the state and this target in terms of the estimate of what we're contracted to do compares with the overall community need?
And that's a great question, Alan. You and I've kind of chatted. This is way under what we need. I have asked the state as late as last week, Monday, to allow us to keep enrolling over target. They've sent me additional information. We think the target was established with certain conditions that failed to materialize. And if you think about this, you're talking about a differential cost for an infant versus a toddler versus an after-school care. So you go by prior year numbers to factor what the cost of care will be in a large program like Dallas. What we have in our mix didn't bear out against their planning. And it may be very different from prior years. That's the other thing. COVID did this. It scrambled data. It scrambled trajectory. So we are now looking at too much money for the number of targets. And I've asked the state to raise our target. The latest information I've gotten is that they expect next year's funding and the year after to be very large dollars, much as we're receiving now. And that perhaps if we show them the conditions that would support our over enrolling beyond 110%, I think we might be able to reach an agreement. And that's not going to cut into the 3,700 by much. So that's sort of the point. There is a greater need than the money, even when the money was not settled on a big target. So something is definitely changing how we view child care. One more thing, they would like to raise rates one more time, which would absorb some of the money right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's one question, and then I think I'll have enough because I want to make one point. But even if we were to use all the dollars, or we raise the quote unquote the target amount, I mean, are we even? Is the overall need for childcare in Dallas to optimize the workforce significantly larger than the amount that we get, or do we feel like if we were able to increase the target by a little bit, that we don't have a major difference in the scale of the community need versus the amount that we receive to provide childcare? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And let me do it by the data. If I take who we're serving now and who's sitting on the wait list, we can clearly say that there's about a 21 or 22% need that is not addressed by the money.
Okay.
But we're not out there recruiting everyone. And we know that working women have not returned to the workforce. So we have jobs going wanting, which means we probably have a need for childcare that's not on the wait list. But I'd like to do some facts and figures with you to support that. Okay.
Yeah. So that's correct. I mean, 20% even feels low, and that makes me feel even better about whether or not we're coming close to the community need. I think there was an op-ed in the Dallas Morning News this weekend that showed the potential need of a multitude compared to what we have. I think my big point would be if we have enough resources to meet scale with scale, so we're able to actually serve everyone, fantastic. That's the best way we can have impact at scale. If we are constrained, so we can only serve a certain percentage of the overall need, then our greatest impact comes with precision. And so, this is really to say that what this tells me, if we're meeting 100% of target and there's still excess need in the community, that we need to start having conversations in future meetings about where are the greatest places to put those dollars. Where are there childcare deserts? What neighborhoods will have the greatest link between more childcare and more work, et cetera, so that we get the greatest impact from every dollar, not just so that we meet the target, but that target has the greatest impact on community need.
Agreed. I think you and I have also talked, there are too many tables right now about childcare. This task force was put together pretty much at your call and Susan's. And I think it would be great if we could drive traffic to this task force around this topic, since we are investing such an enormous amount of money, and drive those players, kind of like your CPAL table. The players who are investing money in childcare, that would be the college system, that would be some of the ISDs, Head Start, which Tori represents a big portion of Head Start. But it would be great to drive that activity to this task force, so that someplace in our community there's a talk about all the resources, and it's probably a good place for it. What do you think?
Well, I think we could do that, but I'll say that I think one of the reasons why that's a good idea is because the data needed for the analysis that's needed to determine that precision currently lives at the local workforce board or through our vendors, in this case, childcare group. And so, I certainly know that I've put in a series of specific data requests to try to get at this precision question. And I know that may take a little bit longer to do, but I think we need to be ready to come with a whole set of specific data points as they're being requested to inform that conversation. So I'll kind of look forward to getting back the specific requests I've put in, but I think that this is the appropriate forum because we have the data, but we're going to need to be able to make sure that we're able to respond to data requests in a pretty timely manner if we want to be that convening table.
Great. That may even require us to raise a little bit of private funding to help us pay for the we can do everything we can do about data on the subsidy program. That is our program. I have a little problem with saying, okay, and we're going to generate data from childcare, all the other childcare systems consistently, which I think would take some MOUs, some real strong arming in some cases to get that data to flow in, and trust, building up a trust about the data. But we can only do so much on the admin. It's not for cost, it's allowability.
Well, everything I've requested can be pulled from the longitudinal data portal that we have access to. And I'll just say, I'll volunteer a member of my team to do the analysis on it, but we need to be able to have access to that. And it'll only take, what I've asked for will only take about 30 minutes to do with that open data portal, but we need to be able to do that analysis.
And I wasn't sure that TWC is also looking at this project, and the state is looking, not the county, TWC. The state, TWC participates in a state initiative that is trying to do this at a state level. So I'm curious if we could learn some things from what they're doing. It's an external project, I believe, but they're trying to pull the state of childcare into one place. So we'll work with you.
Yeah, sorry, I want to go backwards just a second. It's just a question, probably better for Ashley, but I'm trying to reconcile page 5 as aggregate. But looking at this, the number that's different is shows 133 million versus 109 in our budget. I'm just trying to understand what the difference is.
Ashley, are you hearing the question?
I heard page 5 and I heard my name, but I didn't quite hear the question.
Okay, and I'll do the footnote for you. The formula budget, Ken is asking why there is a difference in the budget we just approved. So that would be, say Ken, 100 and
109.
109, and the formula here is 133. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you look at this, the reason it came to my head is when Susan was talking about the context. We often talk about the South being about 80% of our budget, right? That's 82% at 109 million.
But I think footnote 1.
So, but in this, if we take these on page 5, it's 93%. Which doesn't compute.
Well, there's a timing issue here because some of this money runs out in September, some runs out in December. Childcare goes over 18 months in some cases, 15 months and full year. It's very complicated to get it in a one-year budget. Ashley, explain footnote 1 real quick.
Footnote 1 on page 6,
There, sorry.
page 5. I can explain footnote 1, but from what I heard, I'm not sure if that answers the question because I'm still having a hard time hearing the question. Was the question about the budget on page 5 compared to the budget that you're seeing on page 6 with childcare group?
It was about the budget approved by the board last month. Our actual budget for the year was less than this amount on this sheet.
Yes, okay, you're right. Footnote 1 does explain that we received an infusion of provider growth support payments in our childcare formula grant. That's $24 million. And that was after the budget had been prepared. So this is new money that wasn't included in our budget in the board meeting. These provider growth support payments, I think of them similarly to what we saw in the last 2 years. Also in the child care formula grant, we received enhanced reimbursement rates that we would pay child care providers for staying open. So now this year they're calling these provider growth support payments. These are additional 20% payments to providers when we pay them direct care payments.
Sort of a markup on payments.
Do we need to amend the budget?
We will, yes. We would need to bring this into the budget. It's all passed through, Ashley. There's no overhead on this one.
Correct.
So that makes our annual budget 235.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Crazy.
It just keeps growing.
Yes, the money here should come in and go out pretty rapidly, but that's why Ashley needs a bigger staff and so does Mark Browder. They're really complicating the financial workings of this when it's this kind of money that doesn't require outreach and eligibility. It's simply changing all the metrics in the system to meet this for a short period of time and then rolling it back. So those are complicated situations.
Yeah. So can I just go back to Alan's request, because what I heard from a board member that chairs this committee, Laurie, is that he's asked a couple of times for whatever data that is needed to address these deserts. And I just want to make sure that the board are operating with action, and when they make a request that we're trying to get it to them as soon as possible, so they can do the work they need. And I appreciate what you said about the state that they're doing some overlap.
Yeah.
What we're doing, okay, and what we have control of, so we can get the tools that they need to govern themselves. Does that make sense? Or is there a
It does.
challenge
I
in trying to get it?
don't know that we're still lacking data to Alan.
Oh, okay.
Alan, did you mean to first? I don't have data.
About 65% of what I've asked for, I have not received yet. So I'm happy to work with Richard on that. And I know that you've provided a lot of other stuff in preparation for this meeting. So I know people were stretched thin, but I would like the information that we requested to be provided so that we could do analysis, not only for this board, but also frankly, because as you pointed out, Lori, there's lots of other organizations that need this information to do their planning as well.
I mean, interested. We thought there was only one question we were not able to answer in the child care groups package. 65%, that's distressing. So I apologize.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
So
Okay,
I would say
it's all with good intention.
thank you, Michelle. I think let's circle back, or Alan, circle back with you and me after this, and like really
Please.
clearly
That would help.
delineate what's missing, So,
Yes.
so, because I don't think we can respond to that, like you said, but I
No, I
would
just-
assume that as soon as we have the information.
Yeah.
So. Sorry.
Susan, Susan, this is Miguel. This is sort of related, but maybe unrelated. One of the things that would help me, and maybe it's just a me question. When in the childcare group deck, I saw the geospatial distribution of the providers, at least 3 and 4 providers. And then what I think I hear Alan talking about is a way to be able to identify sort of where the hotspots are from a where we should be providing, where the demand perhaps is the greatest. And maybe this is to Alan, it would be helpful to see, first off, if those data need to be triangulated. But I think more importantly, like if we needed to hyper target resources, having that geospatial visualization of where the monies would need to go. I think I heard you say that's what you're looking for, but I also think that would be helpful in perhaps also overlaying the TRS, at least 3 and 4 providers, if that makes
Yeah,
any sense at all.
I'll give you a very specific example. There are several places in Texas code where they provide additional flexibility to workforce boards to put resources in areas where there are the number of children younger than 6 years of age who have a working parent is at least 3 times greater than the capacity of licensed care in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a very specific thing that shows up several times in Texas's code. And I want to make sure that we have a map of those areas so that we know whether or not we should strategically take advantage of that, or whether there are other community resources, whether they be city, county, philanthropic, that we need to start to infuse in those areas.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Susan. I just wanted to ask that question.
So Alan, is that by census tract, zip code, what's the, do you remember what the specific code is?
Census tract, I
Census
think.
tract, okay.
Well, in this case, I don't know. So I mean, if Lori's saying it's census tract, I think one of the reasons I'm asking for the workforce board to provide this is that I think we ought to try to align the community around the definition, because you could arbitrarily say it's based off of a 1 mile radius. You could do whatever. So I don't know. The Texas sort of leaves it a little bit ambiguous. So again, if we could just get a map, or I'm happy to have somebody on my team work with anybody on the team to help sort of support this and create this if it's a capacity issue. But I do feel like we need to, sort of know some of these areas, and then we can have an honest conversation of whether it makes sense to target resources in those areas, or whether other priorities should are more pressing.
So we know from the map that Miguel referenced where kids are in care, but the comparative analysis, I believe that you're asking for is what is the supply in that area? So if there are 100 kids in care, are there really, is that how many kids there are? Is it X percent of them, or is it, what's the capacity for the programs in that specific area to support kids? And then you can tease down and figure out where are there, if there are childcare deserts, where are they in childcare?
That's correct, Susan. And the third dimension, right? This is all a Rubik's Cube, right? And so, it's really, again, I'm have a lot of empathy for how difficult this is to implement. And so, I think childcare group and our board deserve an enormous amount of credit for how well we're doing on just the grants management. But it's, do we have the capacity? Is there the need in the area? And then also, how does that overlay with any special flexibility we have in how we operationalize in these areas based off of the Texas code? So there are certain areas or certain scenarios where they give us greater flexibility to do innovative things if certain need criteria are in place.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm going to ask Stephen. Stephen, have there been comments in the chat that we need to hear?
No, Courtney had to leave, but that's about all. Other than we need to hear the people in the back of the room. Everybody could speak up from the back of the room. That would be great.
Okay. Not me, of course. Okay.
So unless you want Bill and Ken to talk. So let's move on, because I think we have just about 30 minutes. So want to go on to the childcare group overview? What would be the next?
I'm gonna close this up real quick. If I can just talk quickly about a couple of things in here, but I think we have touched the major points in the board staff presentation. There were other sources of money. We were gonna talk a little bit more about quality. We can shelf quality for another day, even though that's very critical. Most of that is operating and operating well. Page 8, these are sources of money that we probably will not see again, but we could see ARPA money, which is what San Antonio is dealing with. These were special grants. This was well done by Child Care Group, extremely well done in helping centers and families with Special CARES Act money. Child Care Relief Fund is on the next page, and that really, it brings us to a few things. The most important part that I want to talk about, page 12, who's using our system? This matters very much when we're talking about Alan's suggestion and Miguel's. If we found the resources to offer the service with any one phone, and it's kind of like the service strategy the state chose. It was a great strategy. It just wasn't what the community wanted. It's like our youth program. We have a great youth program, but it's not what the kids want. So that's another thing we're talking about. Who's actually using it? One parent families, 95% of our customers are one parent families. Is that amazing? Did I have the wrong number?
Page 11.
11, sorry.
Page 11.
No, it's, yeah, the old document is 11. It is 11, but the board has an update. The people around the table got the update with the one slide about the SIR. Sorry about that. 11 in the room, 12 online. And all of you will get this full package posted to the website following this meeting. I was really impressed that most of them are high school graduates. That was not obvious. Only 9% are less than high school graduates, or did not, said 11% would tell us. Most of them are women customers, and you can see the breakout on ethnicity. This sort of helps us understand these are the people who need our services, who are benefiting from our services. What about the people who need our services who will not access this? And I think we have seen that pleasant growth. We have great need, but a lot of family arranged care, not much reliance on formal care in centers. Things we need to look out for. The next page, it will be 13 in the room, 12 online, the pilot, priority areas. And Alan, come back in on this. This is contracted slot pilot. The one decision we need this committee to carry forward to the board is where do we put our emphasis? This is a very special program. There's only 2 boards in the state doing this. Since San Antonio, you would know. I did talk to their director, and he kind of glazed over with, I don't carry that detail around. $450,000, 11 to 25 slots. Target areas. D in the group put in almost every target except for deserts. Only because this is too short term, too little money to attack a desert problem. We need more information. Timeline start this April 2022. Board action is required. We concentrate on infant and toddlers, childcare, well, childcare deserts, where we don't think we can do that. Pre-K partnerships or non-traditional hours, which we talked about today. So our emphasis as a staff would be infants and toddlers, feeling that there have been a lot of births throughout this period, and infant care is very hard to come by, and it is the most expensive. Generally, the parents are at the lowest end of their earnings for their lifetime, regardless of where they are. It's the least they're going to earn probably, and they have the highest cost.
And talking with Alamo, sorry.
Project.
Talking with Alamo, we've started that conversation because the state have linked us together because we are the 2 board areas that are interested in contracted spots for this pilot program. So they are also focusing on infant and toddlers. We're scheduled to meet with them this week with the state to talk about the strategy and the mechanisms that they're going through to put this process in place. It's very structured. TWC is on board. We're trying to make sure that this pilot works between the 2 areas since it's new again. So we're very excited about being able to bring this process.
So if the board opted for infant and toddler, it'd be apples to apples when we look at the 2 pilots.
Absolutely.
Alan, feedback. Oh, Michelle, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just, so.
Okay.
My question, okay, so I think what I heard was that there were state dollars that had to go back, they may be different buckets, so state dollars that have to go back, and we receive new money to the childcare, which was an additional 20%, which was that footnote.
Yeah.
And then I heard that childcare contracted slots, which stuff that Alan is requesting is around where the childcare deserts exist. But you said, Lori, that we may not tackle that because we don't have enough money to do it. So I'm circling back on the money that's going back to the state, the 20% here, but we don't have enough money to attack childcare deserts.
All of the money is siloed and specific to commission action. Just like we couldn't change the industry codes to further use that SIR money. This money right here, the 450, was a competitive procurement offered to all 28 boards and only 2 of us raised our hand. It is extremely difficult to implement and is riddled with information requests and oversight that you cannot imagine. It's not an easy way to run contracted slots, but we're going to try because we have had an outcry from centers for over 10, 15 years wanting contracted slots. What that means for everybody on the call, a contract to a childcare provider would say, we're going to buy 5 slots in your infant room. Whether those slots remain full all the time or not, we're going to pay you every week as though you had 5 kids in care because we want to be able to rely on you having the staff, the competency as a star provider, so we can send the next infant in the door and his mother to talk to you. We can't tell the mother where to put the child, but a high quality open slot for a baby is like gold right now. So those are the contracted slot means we'll pay them, and just to run them up, we're paying the provider whether there's a child in that slot or not with rules. I think it's 40 days or 30 days it can't remain vacant. We have to close it down. So that's a contracted slot. This is a model program. It's in federal legislation. It was being done here in the 90s. It was part of childcare. Yeah, long time. It just kind of went whoop, and everybody stopped doing it. Well, I know Texas just decided it was a waste. It could be a waste. So that's where we're back at the table. Let's take this 450,000 and do something with it. But everything coming to us has a specific population, a specific outcome. None of it is
You can't
like
mix and match. So the SIR money, are we went back to the state and, the state will decide what to do with it. We couldn't say, we didn't have enough SIR, could we use that to address childcare? The footnote 1, I forgot, but that was money, if I'm remembering correctly, that went to support childcare centers. So it was kind of fast, here's $10,000 to help you keep your business open because
extra rate.
yeah, extra rate, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So if you couldn't use that money, the 450 is arguably a little teeny, it's 20 slots, and it's a pilot to maybe build something. You could play that out. Perhaps if there were extra money at the state, they would be obligated to pay for the model. Say, oh, well, that's something we might support. Don't know. But yeah, it's not like
They don't
here's
ever
money,
give money at your
decide what
discretion.
you do. But it's an excellent
That would
question.
be great. But we think we have better ideas with how to use some of this money than they do. But they don't allow us to do that. There's always strings attached with every dollar we get. If we have an idea that we can go forward with and present them our own budget, then that's what you just described. We give them the opportunity to tell us no, or that sounds good, and then we might be able to move it around. So right now, everything has to be. That's what makes Ashley's job that much tougher. I'm glad Carter is kind of looking at that with her also, because that's tedious. There's so much accounting that has to go on with this stuff.
And so many systems have to be pinged and then released and pinged and released, because this happens every 6
Oh, it
months.
happens all the time.
Here's a new idea.
So what action do you need?
If we could get a vote to take to the board, if you're not prepared, we can do that later, but a vote to take to the board to emphasize infant and toddler, to isolate it to infant and toddler so that we have a game plan.
Lori, Mark Browder does have a question.
Yes, sir.
No, that was an accident up there, sorry.
Oh,
You had to stand in your front, Mark.
Very good Well, we answered it properly.
He does really care how this turns
That's the best question we heard.
Staff recommendation is to go with infant and toddlers, be a little more like San Antonio, have that dual input to the state if contracted slots are to be considered on what needs to be done and how, and maybe some of the changes we would recommend, having 2 major board voices without.
So look, I've certainly talked about this at 25 slots. We're not talking about a whole lot of scale to do much anything in these priority areas. To me, I think contracted slots is an important strategy because it gives us a chance to stabilize the revenue model at a classroom level for childcare providers. The cost hit at a classroom level, and I continue to hear about the need for educator pay and then the problems with teacher turnover. So 25 slots, maybe let's just see somewhere whether or not, is there a 4-star or 3-star provider somewhere that is concerned about being able to maintain their current teachers, and can we help them do that? Would be one area, but I'll just say I'm not quite sure that I understand the 11 to 25. I mean, at $450,000, that should pay for about 375 days of 4-star care for at least 25 infants, and even more if it's at other ages. So I hope we try to stretch that. This is a classic example, though, of a situation where other communities in Texas we should learn from. And in other communities in Texas, what they've decided to do is they want to move forward with contracted slots as a strategy, but they've brought city and county and school districts to the table because ARPA dollars don't have the same restrictions as some of our other funds. And so, if we want to take on a childcare desert, or we want to actually deal with one of these need areas, that's a great conversation to have, but that needs to be had proactively with other agencies to see if we can braid other funding to do so. Otherwise, again, we're just doing a 25 slot pilot, and I'm not sure you're going to learn anything about childcare deserts or infant toddlers with that scale.
Everything we need is defensible on the infant toddler right away. A little bit of that money is the oversight requirement, is that correct? There's a management oversight cap. There's money in here, and the state was even worried about the money, but we know we need to do a lot of oversight to comply. These are the kinds of little programs that can get you a disallowed cost. So that's what else is in here, Alan, is the management of this one will have to be different. We didn't just run this through the system, and the state asked us why we didn't. And we said, because it's dissimilar. And if we're going to learn from it, we need to study it.
Yeah, Lori, I get all that. And look, the good news is that we run very, very lean on administrative costs. So we have plenty of administrative costs to shift around, and the cash can be fungible on something like this. But from just like the spirit of this, it's not, are we doing the right thing or the wrong thing? I just want to be super, super clear from a compliance standpoint, from a management standpoint. This is an exemplar organization, and both, as you manage it and as childcare manager. The question that I'm trying to push on is, what are the best ways that we can learn from a community needs standpoint, and how do we fulfill our kind of fiduciary duty to the overall community, not to the auditors?
No, I think that makes perfect sense, and I think if we go back to our goals or guiding principles that I said in the beginning, one of them was understanding the role of the board and staff, both in terms of childcare contract management and overall community strategy. And they're two different questions. They are related. And so I think this pile right here, the answer is this is money from the state. This is what we can do with it. I put that in one bucket to think of buckets analogy. And then the overall strategy consideration around contracted slots, I think it's a different conversation, which fits under the umbrella of overall community strategy. Does that sound right, Alan?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Infant, last page 17, 16, if you're out there. We did not establish the dashboard. We took a shot. What I would like is formal input back from any of you listening or participating here today. What would you like to see on a dashboard? Because as you can see, we could fill out a 20-page dashboard. Childcare does not fit on a page. With that, I will give the floor to childcare group, and my apologies that we are going so long, guys. Can y'all take it from here and touch the highest points we have? I think having this material is enough. The board can see what's afoot. This is huge.
Sure. And thank you so much to the board, to the task force, and to those on the call. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm Tori Manis. I'm President and CEO of Child Care Group. I've been here 10.5 years and was a board member previously. I'm flanked by my colleagues, Sherry Anderson, Vice President of Child Care Assistance, who's been with Child Care Group for 32 years, and Rhonda Rako, who's the Director of the Child Care Assistance Program for the Dallas contract, also with Child Care Group 32 years, and our colleague Mark Browder, who's the CFO, COO, and been with us for 12.5 years. So we've got about a 30-minute presentation and about 10 minutes to do it. But I do want to say, because this is our real first opportunity to give you all a view of what this program is. And I know there's some new board members that mentioned they'd like to better understand the program. So please, we'll go as fast as we can, but I think it's important to know we've been managing this contract for 31 of our 121 years as a nonprofit. We know this business. We have the two people on my left and right know more about it than I would say anyone in Texas does. So we do know this program. It is intensive, it is complex, it is high risk, but it also fits with our overall agency strategy, which I'll get to in a minute. I've been asked to go through our budget. So let's go to the next slide. Child Care Group's 2021 agency budget was $32 million. Of that, you will see the piece that Child Care Assistance Program was. Together with the 4.9 million for the Dallas subsidy program constitutes about 15% of our budget. And then the quality grants for Dallas constitute about 11% of our budget. I want to emphasize for you that the vast majority, you see the big sort of yellow-green area is our Head Start, Early Head Start program. That is a very large program that we've been doing for a long, long time. Each one of our different grants receives an individual independent audit, and in addition to our agency audits. And we're very proud to run programs with clean audits for many, many years. So each of these are individual programs. I also want to highlight that this is 26% of our overall operating budget, but it's only 5%. Only 5% of our budget has to do with overhead. So we're extremely efficient. Next slide, please. Child Care Group's Child Care Assistance, that's what we call this division that manages the subsidy program. This wheel here shows the components of the budget. I want to highlight again, our management of this program, of the subsidy program, is 3% of this overall budget, and the magnitude of the money in purple that is going directly to child care subsidies. And then flip forward an extra slide, Stephen, and I'll finish my piece. One more. I just want to point out that this program fits within Child Care Group's overall strategy of the two-generation approach, where we're providing excellent early childhood education for young children and support services to help their parents go to work or go to school. So this is the overall framework in which we approach our work, and we bring private philanthropy to the subsidy program families that we serve to help demonstrate this two-generation model in action. And with that, we can go to the prior slide, and I will kick it back to Sherry. Yeah.
So, hello, everyone. So what this slide is really telling us, and I'm going to rush through this a little bit, so stop me if you have questions. But basically, this is a snapshot of January 2020 versus January 2022. And we broke down by the age categories. You got infant, toddler, preschool, and school age. And I just want to say on this slide, earlier we talked about targets and going down. So you just keep in mind that the target in 2020 was like 16,000 kids. And now 2022, it is 13,000 kids. So this decrease in children is a direct result of serving less children.
For increased rates.
For increased rates.
Yeah.
And we've had 3 increased rates since 2020. So
We tried to leave out 21, all of the COVID years.
yeah,
so
that
this
was, yeah.
It was a mulligan.
Yeah, there are lots of
Next
explanations.
slide. Next one.
One more. Yeah. So this is just a high level of the subsidy program and the direct scheme. I mean, really, I'm proud of this because Texas is unique in the sense that besides Gulf Coast that I'm aware of, we're the only contractors that actually provide the remote services deployed out into the whole community. So
so we have our office at the, our back office, where our back office team works. And then we have all of our staff that's located in the workforce centers in the neighborhood determining the eligibility. So we create that one shop, that one stop experience. Real quick, the next slide. And just a customer view of this, as Susan knows, we put in a lot of work in this. We want to provide the most flexibility for customers. We have extended hours at the corporate office. They can walk in, they can go to our web portal that we have built, where they can interact and apply and request changes, and they can go through our call center that's all located, and then that all gets routed through a custom business processing system that we created, built by the staff, with staff input, and then that goes out to the workforce center staff that's working all of the cases.
Might add that call center is extraordinary.
It is.
Might be Hilton reservations or
Yes,
better
so
than that.
I have like 2 pages of stuff to brag on it, but it is, we went paperless, it routes work, it gives us lots of data so that we can kind of tell what the parents are needing, why they're calling. It is a very robust, and we have about 4 other workforce boards that use this system.
Is it bilingual?
It is not bilingual because it's internal, so it's not bilingual. But we do have they can change the language.
The web portal is bilingual,
Yeah,
but our staff are the ones using the internal workflow system.
Yeah.
So that's in English because it's what we're using.
But your customer facing.
Our,
is
the
bilingual.
customer
Oh,
facing piece is
Oh,
bilingual.
yes, absolutely.
Trilingual.
absolutely it is.
Next slide, please.
Okay, this is our provider view of just processing the payments. I won't go into detail of kind of how it all flows. I mean, but the main point to take away from this is Workforce Solutions wires the money. We get it, it goes right back out to the providers the same day. No funds are commingled, and we don't hold on to any funding once we receive it.
All of us are dealing with a 3-day cash on hand rule from the federal government. So money in, money out.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to just highlight some of the metrics that we're able to get. In 2021, we received over 53,000 calls from our call center coming in. Those are incoming calls that then gets routed and taken care of where it needs to be. The other big piece of that is our work request. I don't actually have this on here, but it should have been. But in 21, we received 140,556 requests from parents to do something with their case. So a parent comes in, they're determined eligible, and then they're eligible for 12 months, but oh wait, they've got lots of changes in between the 12 months, right? And so what that data will tell us is, what are those changes? What kind of problems are they having? What can we do to try to fix some of their issues, and what do we need to kind of invest in a little bit more? So we have a lot of data on that. Tori?
Okay, sure. The other key thing in the upper right-hand corner is with our existing staff, as Lori mentioned before, there were a lot of COVID grants, relief grants. We processed over $1 million in small payment relief grants to providers with both public funds and private philanthropy. Using the existing staff we have, that's all been audited as well, but we're very pleased to have been able to push out additional support for the providers during COVID. Next slide, please.
Can we go back to the previous slide?
Uh-huh.
Just a question. Which one of those metrics would you most like to change?
You know, I would love to have the calls decrease. We're trying to push more activity to our web portal. Because we're averaging about a 2-minute hold, and that's a long time for parents that's sitting at work, right? Even though we put in some enhancements, like a callback feature and things like that, but we would really like for families to feel comfortable with that whole web piece of that.
It's something you can use your phone. Does it have a?
Yes. Yes, it does.
But the number of leads I can see increases at 14,000 before. We had to find it.
If we have a
Yeah,
phone right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, always.
Absolutely.
Always.
Just real quickly, this chart informs our strategy as it relates to serving childcare providers. We take a systems approach, but we understand all the levers and the players that are in this. We did a pilot of this starting in 2020 through a program called First Five, funded by United Way and PepsiCo. We got started on it, targeting a zip code, putting all kinds of resources into improving the level of care in a neighborhood. We've got great results from it, but expanding this and scaling it was interrupted by COVID. But we also, this is just meant to show you that we think very holistically and we understand all the players that have to be a part of impacting access to care in our community. Okay, next slide.
Dan has a quick question.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to just backtrack a little bit on the comment about the 2-minute hold. And now I'm not sure I'm following where all the funding goes and the unspent funds, but it does seem like a 2-minute hold is a really long time. And while I appreciate the efforts to redirect some of that traffic to online platforms, it would seem to me that if you've got somebody on the phone and they're trying to get through, that the thing to do would be to add more operators so that we could service more people who have already tried to contact us. I mean, I know that when I do business, I hate to be on hold for 30 seconds, much less 2 minutes or longer. And I'm just wondering if some of that funding could be allocated to getting us more help on the phones so that we can serve more people.
Good point. The money that these projects that are elapsing, the money cannot be diverted into the operational piece of our regular program. I believe that's correct.
Well, we can look at your budget.
Okay.
I don't know how many people it would take and whether or not you can find and train the talent. That is also a big issue with y'all and the workforce centers and our own staff right now. So we'll work with you. I mean, that's great. Good. Great. 4 positions. Thanks, Dan.
Good question, Dan. Okay, I think we're
Right. Do we want to continue on with quality, or you mentioned pausing? Okay. This is just a high-level view of our quality team. This is the staff that support the childcare programs in achieving Texas Rising Star certification and maintaining it, which is another challenge. So our overall goal is to get more TRS providers, keep the ones we have, add more, help them overcome the barriers to getting that certification. And then our quality staff do all the wraparound services to support them in meeting those goals. So we support the business operations itself. We support the frontline teachers and their professional development. And then just resources for the childcare program itself.
Next slide, if you could concentrate on the 3 footnotes to tell people what that means, because I think they can read the dollars, but
Yep.
those 3
Absolutely.
budget is very critical.
Sure. So this is a snapshot of budgets. The one on the left is 2021. That's a full year cycle. The bottom section on each one is our set aside budget for Texas Rising Star Mentors. That is a separate allocation that comes from the Texas Workforce Commission to Workforce Solutions. We're allocated the funds to hire, train, and have the mentors. Demetria manages the assessor piece, but it's to cover both those roles. The middle section and the top section are where that 2% quality set aside goes to. This represents the allocation for childcare group. So you'll notice on the left side in 2021, we had a very large section, which is the purple is the direct initiatives for providers. So that's our professional training, equipment and materials, curriculum, and so forth. We work with Workforce Solutions throughout the year to analyze our budget as well as they analyze the funding that they have. In 2021, we had several budget amendments to add funding, and we were able to focus all that additional funding into direct services for providers. So 2022 is a snapshot of where we are right now. Just know that the purple and the orange may flex throughout the year. If we have dollars that we're not utilizing in program management, we funnel it into direct services for providers.
Ask us to move quickly. I think Alan drew everybody's eye to the mapping, but if we could go to page 17 briefly, I'm sorry to skip over too much of the quality, but we're losing people quickly, and that has been, a rich discussion, but if you could just touch on who's in care.
Sure, absolutely. This represents our providers. Again, one thing we're pleasantly surprised with is kind of before COVID and now we haven't had a huge decrease in the number of providers. We've had a huge amount of churn, providers leaving, others coming in. We were able to increase our number of Texas Rising Star providers. So we're very happy about that. And then the next section shows the breakdown of total providers by quality rating. So since our TRS increased, our non-TRS decreased. We had an increase in 2-star, 3-star, we lost a few, and TRS increased a few in there.
Now, the 2-star grew predominantly through state legislative action. Say where licensing now, licensed centers have to pursue a TRS track.
That will be coming. It's not in place yet, yeah.
But they are getting ready. That's
They are
a huge
getting
increase in 2-star.
It was,
Yes.
it was a lot of virtual mentoring that they were able to do when we couldn't go in person. And also when you see a reduction in the 3-star, you see the increase in the 4-star,
Which is awesome.
which is good. So in the middle section, the red number is really good because it moved into quality. And in between all of this, we had a number, this is an aging population of childcare providers. And a lot of them took the time during COVID to say, I'm done, I'm out. So
It's still 107 of 604. That's huge improvement, but still got a long way to go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Next one. Children in care.
Total children in care represents the same, the decrease we've mentioned a few times. Our target age.
Yeah. The age of
breakdown by
children in
age.
care. That's
So next slide, I believe, shows the breakdown by age groups, just a different view of who's in care and where they're in care.
And I think an important note on this is we see a decrease in infants and toddlers. This tracks with the nationwide trend of families during COVID. There's not a vaccine for children under 5, or has not been until just weeks ago. And there were so many parents that decided, no, I'm not going to put my kids in care. So it's not only the drop in our performance target between 20 and 22 with less overall children to serve, but also a function of families not feeling comfortable with their kids in care.
I think maybe someone had a question.
Alex.
Yeah, I mean, two questions, I guess, just from Open Data Portal on the 3 and 4-star providers that are reporting today, there's 1,300 or more than 1,300 open seats and 3 and 4-star providers in the area. And we're talking about what, 160 or so overall providers only that are 3 or 4-star providers. How do you guys handle, like, how do you incentivize families, or do you do anything to try to influence families towards the higher quality providers, or I mean, what does that look like?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk a little bit about that. So we do a consumer awareness campaign with parents. We make sure that they really understand what a Texas Rising Star provider is. We provide the names of the programs that's near them. And so, of course, that's who we give out to the parents, is the Texas Rising Star programs.
But we are restricted
Is
under
there-
federal law and liability for this board and for Child Care Group not to direct any
That's right.
parent. And parents
Yeah.
seem to have a need for convenience. We have noted that they like them closer to work or closer to home, depending on the bus.
Yeah, that's
So-
right. And another
Yeah.
point I think is really important for this board to understand is if there are 1,300 open seats, there is a huge staffing crisis going on.
Yes.
And every single childcare provider that we talk to has at least one closed classroom because they cannot hire staff. So they've got closed classrooms and they can't enroll kids because they cannot hire staff that will take the wages they will pay.
So Tori, that on this point, what's being asked of the providers is seats that they have available for them to report every day. Like, what seats could they actually take kids on? And I'm saying there's 13, there's significantly more if they could hire more staff. I think I'm just saying, I think there's an opportunity area if we have in our highest quality providers, if we have 1,300 open seats, there is some opportunity to try to do even more education or figure out what is the right way to best promote those centers that have gone through the arduous process of not only getting into TRS, but have actually gotten to 3 or 4 star level.
Yeah,
So,
I
it's just
agree
saying it can-
that- I'm sorry, who's may have such a question?
I was just saying, something to consider.
Okay, so if we could, should I jump into the maps?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
how-
you know, I think probably as quickly as you possibly can.
Okay.
Very, very quick.
Sorry, very
You have a
quickly.
lot to say.
And all I really want to say on this is that we've created a dashboard that we run every month so that we can see where the providers are, what area. And then if you go over to the next slide, where the children are. And so whenever we're looking at both of these slides and we see that we have areas where there's TRS providers, but then there's not very many children in those TRS providers, then that goes into the recruiting strategy, and we have hired a company to help us do professional recruiting, where they're doing geofencing and paid social media to drive that message back into the parents.
So it's not necessarily a given that those slots are vacant because parents don't know about them. They just may not be located where children are today. And that was
Right,
one of my
that's true.
points about inner city versus that push out
Right.
for affordability to the suburbs.
Right.
There were some centers who were built a long time ago, who just
Yes.
can't find their population now.
Right.
And they're still asking, there's particularly Jefferson Avenue. I remember I worried with a lady there, great center, all the credentials in the world. Nobody in that community is using her center. And she was very big for about 20 years.
Yeah.
So that open portal, let me just, to the whole board, that open data is not updated consistently, and it is sort of based upon what the provider wants to put in there. So there's no real check and balance.
Is
to
the
that.
availability portal?
Yes, yes, the 501 ops portal.
Oh, yes, yes. So we definitely have lots of flaws with that.
Yes.
Because
Thank you,
we,
state system.
yeah, so we report, we tell the providers what they need to use. That's where we send parents also. But I can't tell you how many emails I get from the state because people can't find childcare because they don't go in and update their information.
They may say they have slots, but in fact, they're full. So they need to get us a marketing toy also. Yeah.
Right.
And can I add that I know Child Care Group for multiple sessions to lobby for the TRS program and increasing quality, but it was very hard because there were some legislators who were also hearing from child care centers who are not meeting the requirements that fought against it. So that's just something to consider.
Not everybody is on a quality journey.
Well, they're saying, well, great, but this is what's closest
Right.
to my constituents right now, and they're not meeting these qualities, and if you put these requirements, they're gonna lose funds.
Yeah, I feel like there are some additional expenses to operate a quality program.
Absolutely.
So that-
And credentialing,
Yes.
that's costly. You gotta be in it for the long game.
Just as with everything else, Rebecca, it is a proposition. You would think it'd be a no-brainer, we want to increase quality, we want to serve more kids. The cost of do so is that the increased range really gets you to be able to stay open with the quality dollars. And the answer is sometimes, depends on the mix. That's a really good point. So I'm gonna thank Child Care Group. You guys went through an awful lot of information in a very quick and clear time. Thank you for doing that. Thank you, Lori and team, for the information you shared. Thanks for the grace of all the committee members for hanging in and extra time because we just want to issue. So just in summation, I think that we have some follow-up with Alan to make sure that we get the information he has requested, or if it's in there, I'll tease that out for him so he may need, particularly with a focus on looking at child care deserts as a potential strategy. I'm also talking about overall, Lori, I think you well taken your point of, is this the right table to have people around all in this focus area all together looking at this issue, given the amount of resources that workforce has in this area. So that's another thing that I think we need to take back. I think that there is, again, if everyone would take a look at the issue around the application for the contracted slots, because I think we do need to hear back from this committee at some point as to if it's the offers that you want to focus on. So that you can move forward with but you don't have to have a decision today.
And the dashboard.
Miguel?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to be try to be extremely quick on this, but it was actually to that point, building off of something that Rebecca just mentioned about, you know, like the notion of needing to continue to try to improve quality, and that being something that it sounds like childcare group and we as a board are trying to focus on. So there were two quick questions, and I think it is related kind of to the dashboard and what that thing could potentially look like. The first one, and by the way, these don't have to be answered right now. Maybe just like I'm making a note of them, and maybe we could have some answers in the future. So the first one was around what the actual dashboard looks like. And prior to that, the slide 16 around the goals themselves. So when I'm trying to like triangulate both of the presentations, so we can stick to this slide that you're showing right now. On the childcare group presentation in the appendix, there is the idea of increasing the number of TRS providers by something like 5%. And I don't know when, I don't know if that was like annually or if it's 5% annually from 2019 to 2023 or 2024, which is I think what childcare groups strategic plan years are. But I was trying to make sense of those numbers and then the numbers that we see on the screen here, which says increase TRS providers by 20% and even the TRS star level 3 and 4 by 10%. So my first question would simply be trying to get an understanding as to how those numbers jive, because I would assume when we build the dashboard, we want those things to be the same, and I may just be misinterpreting it. So that's number one. The second one is around the goals that we're looking at right now and trying to better understand do these numbers change next year? Are these numbers going to remain the same? And if so, for how long? And when did we start tracking if we were going to, where we were when it comes to increasing in the first bullet's case, TRS providers by 20%, right? So like, what are the baseline data that we're trying to determine year to year if we're on the path to hitting them? On slide 17, I look at that and I can see monthly how we're doing, but it would be helpful, I think, maybe it's to me as we build out the dashboard to understand where we started, where we ultimately end, what those years are, and then some clarity around the triangulation of the data between the appendix in childcare groups slides with slide 16 and the goals that we've set. I said I was going to be quick, but I was not quick. So my sincere apologies.
Which numbers are the numbers we are measuring, and where do we start, and how are we going? Yeah.
We're happy to pick this up at the April board meeting where we're leaving off, Miguel, and I think we're looking at 2 dashboards, one for kids in care and one for quality. And I can make that happen.
Awesome. Thanks, Lori.
You too.
Anything else? I think we also said we would look to the board to come back with a recommendation. What you learn on this IR pilot, what might be recommended to the state, what in particular. So I think that's.
And I think there's one more. And I may need like the braided funding.
Great. That was the overall community strategy with contracted slots. How might we look at that broadly? The first one I have to start with.
But also on research.
Yes. Yeah. Anything else? Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for hanging on. All of you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Great presentation. Thank you all. Great presentation.
Thank you, Ellen. Bye-bye.
Thank you.